So in our series on Bach's inventions and especially Czerny's metronomization, which we use in this case not to understand how Bach originally would have played, though it would be interesting to study Czerny, but we use this as to understand the metronomizations in general. We arrive at number 12, A major, a very interesting piece, very difficult also if you're familiar with keyboard instruments, period instruments I would say, clavichord, harpsichord, you would know that A major is not always the easiest key because of the situation where you have to position your thumb and actually the impossibility, or it's not very easy to position your thumb on the black keys, and then A major obviously is posing some challenges. So here we have 12-8. We talked about the 8 structured time signatures and 9-8-6-8 in previous episodes. We have also compared 3-8 in two different versions. Go back to the previous episodes if you want to know more of that. On that, I'm not going to repeat here what I've said there. 12-8 is in the same family, obviously, as 9-8 and Kirnberger, as we mentioned in the other videos actually made some very cool remarks on that. So 12-8 could be, so very quickly, 12-8 could be compared to 4-4. It's a similar tempo, though Kirnberg is not really clear, is contradicting a little bit, as I think himself, like saying the triplets would go like in the speed of 8th notes here, but the 8th notes, though, they could be played a little bit lighter in touch and articulation. On the other hand, they allow also the player or the composer to emphasize the 3rd note of that group, which is not possible in triplets, which is actually pointing to a little bit of slower tempo. So I guess it's depending on the context of the piece, but the tempo in the sense of tempo ordinario is not very, very different from the 4-4 or 3-4 structure. At least that's what Kirnberger suggests. So here we have a notation that is not very strange or is very far away from what I would say is a tempo ordinario normal structure. 16th notes are used. There are no 32nd notes, so this is simple notation in that sense of rhythmical structure. Harmonically as well, there's a very open structure. We have a normal pattern of harmonic progression. There is not something where suddenly after 2 8th notes or in the midst there's a syncopation or what have you, where a new harmony is actually occurring. And in fact, the harmonic progression here is rather slow, like for instance in bar 2, you have here the dominant E major is going to A major. So it's all normal stuff. There is nothing exceptional. This piece is not an exception at all in this perspective. So let's right away go over to the players. We have 9 performers, the same as always, but I promise you, the first one will really surprise you. There we go. And of course, the burning question now is, what are these tempo compared to Czerny? So Czerny gives 96 for the dotted quarter note. And yes, Lisitsa is much slower. This is one of these pieces where she is actually, not following her own advice, which I mentioned it before. She says, like, the inventions for me are study materials, so I play them as fast as I can. She does that, I think, in the majority of the cases. We had, I believe, the F minor, where she definitely was not on her top speed, but she tried to make like more of an interpretation, I would say, of the piece. And in this case, she's trying that as well. So she is actually far below Czerny in single beat. She's actually also far below Czerny in whole beat. So Czerny in whole beat would be like, let's say, half of 96. She is far below that. I'm on place number 2, second place, I would say 46%, so very close to Czerny whole beat. Koopman is spot on Czerny whole beat. Then we have Nikolayeva, 55%, and I would say Lisitsa is a little bit. I mean, is on. If we would, you know, have different categories. We talked about it before, and it's very interesting. You hear sometimes like here is a gap in tempo. People are speeding up like 10%, and suddenly the piece changes. It's a very, very interesting exercise, guys, to do that, to listen to these fragments. It's 7-8 seconds. It's all you need to hear and to experience, to feel the difference in tempo. And I cannot emphasize that enough. Everybody knows that. Every musician knows that changing tempo changes everything. That's why tempo research should be in the center of every musician's life, at least, or practice at least, as if he or she really cares about the intention of the composer. And that's why we need to understand these metronome marks. That's why we need to first be able to play them in order before we go beyond them and say, okay, now we know what Beethoven wanted, but this is actually what I want. We have to be able to reconstruct those and to play those. But I'm digressing. But all to say that, you know, from Nikolayeva to Leonhardt, that's just 8%. But go back, just go back in the video and listen to the difference. Suddenly, this piece becomes a different one. 55%, 63%, is 53 on the metronome, is 60 on the metronome. You would say like, that's not so much, but listen how the piece changes. And then you go to Schiff, from Leonhardt to Schiff, it's again a different world. I would say here, you pass also a threshold of a certain, if you would give a tempo word to the performance, you go to another world. Meyer, the same thing. And so then comes Glenn Gould, and Glenn Gould is a little faster even than whole beat, than single beat, I should say. But also listen to his ornaments. He just doesn't play the first ornaments. He's sacrificing that. He's compromising for speed. But guys, this is a very interesting overview. We have from 34% up to single beat. So we have far below whole beat, and we match the single beat. So as an average, 65% is still a sign. It's much closer to whole beat than to single beat. So that's, of course, the whole exercise that we're doing here is like, what happens when musicians don't know or are not really fighting a metronome mark or a given tradition, or do not have, you know, when the intention is not in the first place to go on stage and try to be seen as a virtuoso player, which happens a lot of times. We may not be aware of that, but that's actually what drives a lot of musicians to play faster and faster. Like, see how fast I can play. And from the other way around is true as well, because so many people have played that fast. When you go on stage and you play slower, you play a Beethoven sonata slower than most pianists do that, guess what the remark will be? Yeah, maybe it's not really that great of a pianist compared to, you name it, because he or she plays slower. So technically he's inferior, or maybe he should practice or learn a little. So it's our benchmark of defining who is professional and not. How many notes can you play per second? And we apply that to all the music. I'm sorry for the microphone hit. We apply that to the music we know so well. But here in the case of the Inventions, when you go on stage with the Inventions, you're playing Bach. So you extract yourself, or the musical world allows you to extract yourself from this judgment on virtuosity, because that it is. And what happens then is that, I underline this a lot of time, but I I'm experienced enough now that I know that I have to repeat myself a zillion times in order for people to understand exactly what I mean. I do not mean with this video series to teach you how to play Bach. It would be interesting. Just take Czerny's brain, so to say. There you have it in front of you. This is how Czerny played Bach. Probably very close to how Beethoven played Bach. So it's really, really interesting. But that's another research. I just want to show you what happens when people get rid of this idea of virtuosity, of this being chased as a player by the audience and being chased in order to play as fast as they can, or at least as fast as all the others, in order to be seen as a professional. What happens then is that suddenly a lot of players are playing around whole beat. And I can promise you that will also happen when you would consider the classical music, like the sonatas, the Mozart, Haydn, Beethoven, Schubert sonatas, and even going further, Chopin. Just open your mind for it, and those tempi, those whole beat tempi will just come by itself. It's not so hard. I'm not going to give you a single beat or whole beat, single beat overview, because you have two players, Koopman and Gould, and by experience I know every time I use a fragment of Gould that's longer than 10 seconds, the video gets a copyright claim, which would not be the worst thing on the planet. But in the case of Gould, the owner of his recordings are blocking actually a lot of times the video, so I don't want to risk that, not now and not in the future. So, but you have Koopman and you have Gould in the overview. Just go back and listen to it if you want to compare, or go on YouTube and you'll easily find the Inventions played by Koopman or by Gould. So guys, that was it for today. Up to number 13, that will be interesting as always. I can promise you 14, 15 are waiting. When we are finished there, I will make an overview, obviously, of what the results are, of the 15 inventions combined. Okay, that was it for today. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And if you want to push us, of course, beyond everything, for instance, to write a 750-page thick book, I mentioned it before, working hard on that. Its manuscript is almost finished. Then consider becoming a patron. We have a cool community there. We're hanging out each month, so you can talk directly to me and to the other members of the Patreon community. And if that's something for you, I appreciate it a lot for you checking this out. So that was it for today. Thanks for watching. See you soon again.